Hello there, welcome to International Trade 101. You're still with me, your friend Fredman John. And today we're going to continue with the second segment of the methods of payments or terms of payments, under which the focus of this discussion will be on documentary collection as the means of payments between the buyer and the seller, or an exporter and importer. To begin with, let's start by understanding the meaning of a documentary collection. A documentary collection is an arrangement whereby the goods are shipped and the relevant bill of exchange is drawn by the seller directed to the buyer. Also, documents which are concerned with that particular transaction are sent to the seller's bank with clear instructions for collection through one of its corresponding banks located in the buyer's country. Now, from this definition, there are some key aspects that we really need to comprehend, and that is a bill of exchange. That is a document which is used to convey information on the amount that the buyer owes the seller. Later, we're going to have a thorough discussion on the bill of exchange. But just to let you know is that once the deal is struck between these two business counterparts, I mean the buyer and the seller will draw a bill of exchange. Now, the bill of exchange will be accompanied by collection order or instructions for collection. Instructions for collection are meant to assist the bank to comprehend the agreement or the trade agreement between the buyer and the seller, and what to do the moment a banker has received the sent documents. Now, the bill of exchange, together with the instruction for collection or collection order, are compiled and released to the exporter's bank, and the exporter's bank will forward these documents to the buyer through a correspondent bank that is located in the buyer's country. So that is to say, there is the concept of correspondent relationship, and this means banks keeping an account for one another. So once the correspondent bank has received these documents, will make effort to inform the buyer so that the buyer can come over and do the needful. Now, let's turn our attention to the bill of exchange. By definition, a bill of exchange is an unconditional order in writing addressed by one person to another, signed by the person giving it, requiring the person to whom it is addressed to pay on demand or at a fixed date or at a fixedly determinable future date a sum certain in money to or to the order of a specified person or to the bearer. This definition can be a little bit kinky to comprehend. However, by using some examples, it can be a little bit easier or much easier to understand. Now, to fully comprehend the meaning of this definition, we need to come up with some fictitious participants. Now, let's assume that Mr. Freddy is a creditor of Azam. Azam is a company that have just received some supplies from Mr. Freddy. And that is to say, now Azam is a debtor of Mr. Freddy. Azam owes Mr. Freddy 20 million Tanzanian shillings. And Mr. Freddy will prefer to get paid by the 3rd of April 2020. Now, from this simple example, we can redefine the bill of exchange so that it can be comprehensible to every one of us. Remember, Freddy is the creditor and Azam company is the debtor. Now, a bill of exchange can be defined as an unconditional order in writing addressed by Mr. Freddy to Azam Corporation, signed by Mr. Freddy, requiring Azam Corporation to pay on demand. Now, to pay on demand, it means the moment Azam has been supplied with the bill of exchange, is supposed to make the payment, and that is the 20 million Tanzanian shillings that it owes Mr. Freddy. And if it is to pay at a fixed date, let's assume to pay the 20 million Tanzanian shillings by the 3rd of April 2020 to Mr. Fred or any other bearer of the bill of exchange. Now, the bill of exchange has 3 participants, which are number 1, the drawer, the drawee, and the payee. The drawer is the person who makes the bill, and so from our previous example, the drawer is Mr. Freddy. Drawee, on the other end, is the person who is required to make the payment, and therefore, from our previous example, drawee is Azam Corporation. And last, the payee. The payee is the person to whom payment has to be made. So the payee can be the bearer of the bill or any other person specified on the bill. That is to say, a payee from our previous example is Mr. Freddy. Further, there are 2 types of the bill of exchange. The first type is known as the sight or demand draft. Now, the sight or demand draft is a type of a bill of exchange that requires the drawee to make payments the moment the bill has been presented to him by the banker. That is to say, the sight or demand draft does not require this particular bill to be accepted, simply because the moment it has been presented to the drawee is supposed to meet the contractual obligation, and that is to pay the amount that has been mentioned on the bill of exchange. And here is the specimen or the example of the sight or the demand draft. You can see that this one was drawn at Dar es Salaam on the 3rd of April 2020. It reads, "At sight of this bill of exchange, please pay to our order the sum of 20 million shillings only for the value received." This bill was drawn by AAA exporters, signed by the managing director, and directed to Noble Exporters Limited in Nairobi. So that is to say, the maker or the drawer of the bill is AAA exporter, while the drawee is Noble Exporters Limited of Nairobi, Kenya. The other type of bill of exchange is known as the term usance or tenor draft. Now, this type of bill of exchange defers payments. That is, it allows some time to pass before the drawee could make payments. In another way around, I can say this type of bill of exchange requires the drawee only to accept, not to make payments the moment this bill of exchange has been presented to him. Rather, to accept the bill and come over to make payments at an agreed future date or at an agreed number of dates. So, here is our example. This one again was drawn at Dar es Salaam on the 10th of April 2020. It reads, 60 days after the date of this bill of exchange, please pay to our order the sum of 10 million shillings only for the value received. Again, this bill was drawn by AAA exporters, hereby standing as the maker of the bill or the drawer, and the drawee is the Noble Exporters Limited. So, upon receiving this type of bill of exchange, Noble Exporters is supposed to accept this bill of exchange. And once the Noble Exporters accept this bill of exchange, then it becomes a negotiable instrument and no exporters will be liable. That is, once 60 days have passed, is supposed to have made payments of 10 million Tanzanian shillings to the AAA exporters for the service that was rendered to them. Not all the time the drawee is supposed to accept this type of bill of exchange. Sometimes the drawer might want this bill to be accepted by the banker of that particular drawee. And if it happened that the banker has accepted this bill on behalf of its customer, noble exporters, this is what we call avalization. Now let's move on. This TINA, or the usance draft, requires the drawee to make payments either at a fixed date, for example, on the 30th of April 2020, or after the lapsing of a certain number of days, let's say 60 days after the acceptance. So it depends with the arrangement between the buyer and the seller. Now, what are the parties to a documentary collection? Number one is the principal. You can also call him the remitter or the exporter. So the principal is usually the seller. So this is the person who has agreed to sell or to render a certain service to the buyer. And once the service has been rendered, later the seller is supposed to prepare collection documents or collection instructions and includes all other documents as per the agreement. After preparing all these documents, the principal will present these documents to its bank, and the principal's bank is known as the remitting bank, which is located in his country. So the next part is the remitting bank. The remitting bank is the bank that is located in the exporting country. Usually this is the bank where the principal or the exporter will entrust the documents. The documents are to be forwarded to the buyer, who is also serving as the importer, but this will be done through the buyer's bank, which is known as the collecting bank. The third participant is the collecting bank, also known as the presenting bank. This bank is located in the buyer's country or the importing country. So it is the bank that will collect or will receive the forwarded documents from the remitting bank and presents these documents to the importer. Further, this is the bank that will receive payments from the importer and forward these payments to the exporter through the exporter's bank, which is the remitting bank. Again, I should remind you that both collecting and remitting bank corresponds with each other. That means they keep on accounts from one another. And the last participant in this arrangement is the buyer or the importer. So this is the person to whom documents are presented for him to either accept and or later on makes payment. Now, there are some uniform rules for collection, hereby abbreviated as URC, and these rules were brought forward by the International Chamber of Commerce, or ICC, and they are approved by the banks. URC regulated the main rights and duties of the parties with regard to the documentary collection. These rules and provisions, however, are only binding if they do not contradict any other agreement which have already been concluded or legislation which takes priority. just to let you understand the context of this phrase is that in this arrangement, documentary collection, the first thing is for the buyer and the seller to reach into an agreement. So this line means that whatever the agreement that has been reached between the buyer and the seller cannot be superseded by the URC. However, if there are no agreement, then the uniform rules will take over should there be any dispute. The liability of the banks with respect to handling of the documentary collection orders is restricted only to the forwarding and releasing of documents against payment or acceptance. Again, this is to say that the uniform rules requires bankers to exercise reasonable care when forwarding and releasing documents. Otherwise, they won't be liable. So the liability of the banker is only in the aspect of forwarding documents, that is, remitting bank forwarding documents to the importer through the collecting bank, and when collecting bank or presenting bank presenting the documents to the importer. There is where they will be liable should there be any mistake. There are 3 stages in documentary collection. Number 1, the issue of collection order by the seller or the remitter to the remitting bank. Number 2, the forwarding of the collection order by the remitting bank to the collecting bank. And number 3, the collection of the proceeds by the presenting bank. So these 3 summarizes the mode of operation of the documentary collection. Now we're going to discuss the 3 aspects of the documentary collection. Now let's start with the issue of collection order by the exporter to the remitting bank. The exporter is the seller. So the seller will obtain the document of title, and this is the bill of lading from the shipping company. Or if for some reasons the exporter has chosen to use the airliner, then he can obtain what we call airway bill. So once the principal has obtained this document, he will compile all the required documents together with the collection order before he could handle them to the remitting bank. So the principal will be required to draw the bill of exchange, compile or includes the document of title plus any other relevant documents as per the agreement. It can be an invoice, insurance, certificate of inspection, certificate of origin, consular invoice, etc., etc. And last, the collection order. Remember, the collection order includes clear instructions. This is the one that will inform the collecting bank or the presenting bank on what to do the moment it has received the documents. Remember, during the agreement between the buyer and the seller, bankers were not there. So it is this document, the collection instruction or collection order, that will assist the banker to fully comprehend what is going on. Upon receiving the collection instruction, the banker or the bank will prepare its own instruction, but this instruction will include each and everything that has been presented or has been prepared by the seller and later on forward to the collecting bank. The next step is the forwarding of the collection order by the remitting bank to the collecting bank. Now, as I have mentioned earlier, once the remitting bank has received instruction and all other relevant documents from the seller, it will prepare its own instruction that will embed all instruction that has been handed to the bank by the seller following the collection order that was prepared by the seller himself, and will address or remit these documents to the importer through his bank, which is the collecting bank. And the third part is the collection of the proceeds from the importer by the presenting bank. That is, the moment the importer's bank, and this is presenting bank or collecting bank, has collected informations, the forwarded documents from the remitting bank, the banker will open the instructions, and depending with the instruction, it will act accordingly. For example, if instructions are for the document against payment, here the banker is required to release documents only, and if only the buyer, that is the importer, makes payments. Short of that, banker will not release the documents. But if the instructions are for the document against acceptance, here it will require the banker to release documents only if the importer come over and accept the bill of exchange. Now, from these two scenarios here, you can see that if the instructions are for the document against payment, then the seller will include demand draft, because demand draft does not require acceptance. Rather, it requires the buyer to make payment the moment the draft has been presented to him. So document against payment requires the seller to prepare demand draft. On the other hand, document against acceptance, this one requires the banker to release documents the moment the buyer has accepted the bill of exchange. In this setting, you can see that the bill of exchange that is suitable under this arrangement should be the demand, or should be the tenor draft or usance, because that is the type of bill of exchange that defers payments. If and when the bill of exchange is paid, the importer's bank will remit the funds to the remitting bank for the credit of the exporter's account. If goods are sent by sea, a bill of lading is necessary to obtain the goods, and if goods are sent by air freight, the airway bill is necessary to obtain the goods. Remember, bill of lading is the document of title. Without this document, the buyer or the importer won't be able to claim the goods from the shipping company. As long as the banker still have documents, it means the exporter still has a control over the goods. But the moment the documents are released to the importer, it means the seller is no longer having a control over the goods. He has lost everything, and so if payment has been successfully made, then there won't be any problem. When goods are to be released against payment, it may not be necessary to include a draft, as the release of the documents would be made upon payment of the invoice amount, but it is common to include a side draft. We have already discussed this part so far. As I have mentioned earlier, documentary collection has four parties. Number one is the exporter or the principal, and number two is the remitting bank. Remember, if the exporter is in China, then the remitting bank should be in China too. And it is the remitting bank that will take documents from the exporter and forward them to the importer through his bank, which is collecting or presenting bank. The remitting bank and collecting bank are the two banks that correspond to each other. The collecting bank or presenting bank is located in the importing country. That is to say, if the importer is in Tanzania, then the collecting bank will be in Tanzania as well. Next in this arrangement is the carrier. The carrier can be the shipping company, truck company, railway company, or any other transporting company. The carrier is responsible to transport goods from the exporting country to the importing country. Now, if the arrangement is the documentary collection, the first thing is for the exporter and importer to reach into an agreement. And so they will agree on a number of issues. For example, they will agree on the price of goods, date of delivery, documents to be produced, methods of settlements, and the method of payments. And as I have mentioned earlier, let's assume the method of settlement the method of payments here is the documentary collection. Now, once the agreement or the deal has been struck, the next step will be for the exporter to send goods to the carrier, who will subsequently supply the exporter with the document of title. And this document of title also will serve as the evidence of carriage or the contract of carriage, and this is what is known as the bill of lading. The exporter will later compile all required documents as per the agreement and prepare a collection order. Once everything is in place, the exporter will provide this document to the remitting bank. The remitting bank will prepare its own collection order, includes all documents that has collected from the exporter, and forward those documents to the importer through his bank, which is collecting bank. The collecting bank, upon receiving these documents, will open and read the collection order or the collection instruction. Remember, the collection order includes the instruction on what to do. Upon reading the collection order, the presenting bank will inform the importer about the documents. Once the importer has arrived, if the instructions are for the documents against payments, then the importer will be required to make payments. Remember, if it's document against payments, it means the type of bill of exchange so included will be the demand draft. So once the demand draft has been presented to the importer will be required to make payments as per the contract, and it is then and only then the presenting bank will raise documents. Once the importer has received these documents, he will proceed to the shipping company or the shipping agents to claim for the goods. In the meantime, the collecting bank will remit the received funds from the importer to the remitting bank, which will subsequently credit the account of the exporter. But if the arrangement is for the document against acceptance, it means upon receiving the information about the existence of the documents at the presenting bank, the importer will have to come over and accept the bill of exchange. Now, after accepting the bill of exchange, the presenting bank will raise the documents, and as earlier, the importer will proceed to collect the goods from the shipping company or shipping agents. And after making sales and everything, once the bill has matured, the importer will be required to come back to make payments, and upon receiving these payments, the collecting bank will remit the funds to the remitting bank, which will subsequently credit the exporter's account. So this is, in summary, the mode of operation of documentary collection And here we have discussed both categories of the documentary collection, that is, the document against acceptance and the document against payment. Now, let's proceed to see the contents of the collection order. The collection order is a standard form of authority which enables the exporter to include specific instructions to its bankers in respect of the documentary collection. Now, the instructions so included in this order can be to release the documents against payment or to release the documents against acceptance. But also, instructions so included needs to assist the banker to know what to do with the goods just in case there will be a no-show, that is to say, the importer failed to appear at the bank. So all costs and the way those goods must be handled or disposed must be included in the collection order or collection instructions. Again, it should clearly state who will meet the bank charges. Again, the collection order needs to inform the banker on whether it should protest or not to in case of non-payment or non-acceptance. However, if the importer has already committed himself, that is, he has accepted the bill, he will be legally binded or legally liable to make payments on maturity. In case of a dishonor, how the dishonor should be advised to the exporter. Last, the method of settlement. Now, the exporter might mention the methods he will prefer funds to be remitted to him. It can be mail transfer, telegraphic transfer, SWIFT, MoneyGram, or Western Union. Now, we all understand that in the first and second method of payment, there were a number of risks involved. Remember, the first method of payments we discussed was the advance payment. We saw that it poses no risk at all to the exporter but to the importer. That being the reason, importer will prefer to go for the open account. On the other hand, open account poses no risk at all to the importer but to the exporter. And both methods did not involve banks. That is to say, in case of default, no any kind of liability will be placed on the shoulder or over the shoulder of the bank. But with the documentary collection, we have seen the degree of involvement of the bank. That is, according to the uniform custom rules, the banker will be liable in case there will be a proof of negligence on the part of the banker. So, let's see the ways to minimize risk in the documentary collection. If it's for the document against payment, in case of dishonor, ensure goods are secured and insured until an alternative buyer can be found. If there is a case of need, if the agent is reliable, give him full powers to sell the goods on behalf of the exporter. In case of the document against acceptance, once the document has been accepted, goods are released with no assurance of payment. The parties should agree beforehand that the released documents against acceptance provide. This means the bill of exchange will be accepted by the importer's bank and hence payment is guaranteed. And this is what I earlier mentioned, what we call averalization. That is, the importer's bank will accept the bill of exchange on behalf of the importer himself. Now, what are the advantages of the documentary collection to the seller? Number one, the process is not complicated and less expensive. Number two, the documents of value are not released to the buyer until the payment or acceptance is effected. So remember, under the open account, the exporter or the seller was required to send goods and later send documents, all documents. Literally, he'll lose control of the goods. But with this method, still he will have a control over the goods. Why? It is because even though he has already sent the goods, but still the documents of title are with the bank. The collection may facilitate pre-export and post-export financing. What does this mean? It might happen that the bill of exchange will mature in 90 days, but before that time, the exporter is in need of funds. If the bill is accepted, then the exporter can use the bill to get a quick cash from a bank. That is, he can discount the bill. Alternatively, he can use the collection order, the documented collection, to secure a credit facility. And what about the disadvantage of this method to the seller? Number one, he ships the goods without any promise for payment from the buyer. That is to say, even though they have an agreement, but remember, these two gentlemen do not know each other, so the buyer can simply disappear. There is no guarantee for payment, and since this is some kind of a credit sale, it means the exporter will be tying his capital until he has received the funds. And if it happens that the importer has met someone who is selling the exact same goods at a relatively cheaper price, this will be even more risk to the exporter, simply because the importer will go and purchase those goods to that someone else. Advantage to the buyer. Number one, collections favor the buyer since payment is deferred by him until the goods arrive or even at a future agreed date. But this is only in the case of document against acceptance. Disadvantage is that if he has already accepted the bill of exchange, he will be legally liable to pay the bill on maturity. He cannot excuse himself from this contract for any other reason. In case he does so, the reputation of his business may be damaged, and for some reasons he will be required to pay that particular bill. Ladies and gentlemen, this marks the end of this presentation. Should you have any question regarding what we have covered so far, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. I wish you all the best. Stay safe, stay healthy, and good day.